Hello and welcome to the second episode of Frogs of Lore. My name is Jason.
Hi, I'm Jim.
Hi, this is Dustin.
In this episode, we've got a few things we're going to talk about. First, we're going to touch on our favorite characters, events, or stories from the lore. After that, we're going to discuss some of the things that we're excited about coming in Mark 4. So Jim, why don't you start us off? What's the character, story, or event in the lore that you're most excited about?
So I'm really a fan of Circle, and my favorite character has always been Balder. Being a woodworker and a sculptor artist, I've always kind of been drawn to him. He's known for creating the wolds, sculpting the stones and the twigs and the ropes, and next you have an animated golem. So he's always been a big fan of mine. So one of his big stories is when he dies. He's going up against the Legion. He's trying to stop them as they invade this area. He can't get the support he needs from Morvana. She's got all the beasts and she's running fast at the Scorn. Kaya wants to come help him, and he's like, I'll take all the wolves I can find. And he goes up against Legion. Unfortunately, Lilith fills him full of some arrows, and he doesn't survive. And you have Kaya showing up later, and he's already dead. And Megalith is just standing over his body, kind of like a protector, but it's too late. Morvana tells her, it's part of the cost, and we got to think of the bigger picture. But she can still feel a little bit of his life force in the ground, and she leaves the wolves to kind of stand watch over him. All the many wolves that were there and many miles around have started to come and create a circle around his body, and it's a monument to him. And she basically tells Morvana that she's no longer going to follow her, and she's going to take off on her own now. And that starts a whole nother story for Kaya. But months later, Cassius and Wormwood basically tell Grail that he has a task and sends him to this site where Balder has fallen. While he's there, he thinks, this is just such a waste of so much power. All these wolves are sitting here. It can't be wasted like this. As he walks up to Megalith, Megalith is like standing there with his hands in the air like he's holding the moon and stars up, it says. And at his feet, Balder's body is just standing there or sitting there on the ground, pristine, like nothing's ever happened.
I think Balder was like wrapped in vines that were coming off of Megalith.
Yeah, it was coming directly from his body, covering him like a blanket. And so Grail is like basically praying, saying, we need these wolves. Can we have them back? And then out of nowhere, Balder pops up with a little grin on his face and says, I'm not done with them yet. You can't have them. He tells about how he was gone. His body was torn asunder, and Megalith helped him reform it. His soul was basically with Oribus itself. He was able to see the workings of the world, and in the process, he saw Cryx in the ground going through these tunnels, and he knows he has to stop them now. So he tells Grail to basically go take care of Kaya, protect her. He's got work to do. He needs all the wolves, and they take off to stop this Cryx invasion. So that's kind of the end of that storyline. I don't want to get too far into it, but that was always my favorite one, was just seeing him. He fell, but he was not done. And the cool part was, as he came back, he talks about how he's on borrowed time. Because of how close he came to Oribus, he's got this fuel of strength in him, but it's burning him from the inside out, and he knows he won't last long. So he's got a purpose, and he's out to finish this mission, and he doesn't know how long he'll last. So he wants to make sure Kaya is well protected when he's gone, and he wants to make sure he succeeds. So it's just really cool storyline that involved him in a way that you wouldn't expect leading up to this.
And the interesting thing about that is he sends Grail to go actually tell Kaya, which she already doesn't really trust him too much. He's just this new upstart. And for Kaya, Balder, he was more than a mentor. He was a mentor to Grail, but to Kaya, he was essentially her father. So it was such an emotional time when Grail goes to Kaya and tells her this, and she thinks he's lying. She thinks it's a joke. She thinks it's a game. And at one point, she tenses up so much that her warp wolves, they and her Argai, they kind of start to move forward, and they start to tense up. And Grail really has to handle the situation delicately to finally get her to believe and go along with him.
Yeah, and if I remember right, I think he even warns Grail not to let her come to him because he's already seen that something will happen to her if she shows up, so he wants her to stay away.
Right, but it's Kaya, so she doesn't listen, of course.
Of course, yeah. All right. So what's your favorite?
For me, it's got to be Tristan Durant. When I first got into the game, Protectorate was the faction I wanted to play most, but we got Scorn and we got Protectorate in our mystery boxes. Donna chose Protectorate, so I went with Scorn. Later on, I started discovering the novels, and Godless was the first that I got into. The interesting thing about that is it has Scorn fighting Protectorate. More importantly, it has the first caster Donna started with, Severius, and the caster I was playing with in Scorn at the time, Hexerus. I don't want to spoil anything or get into the details, but there's a pivotal battle there. And when that happened, Tristan was there, and he proved himself mightily on the battlefield. The thing about Godless is that it's a coming of age story for Tristan. He's just a humble priest at heart. He's a warcaster because he has to be. But Tristan would be a lot more happy down on the streets, preaching to the poor, handing out bread, doing things like that. Through the course of the story, he's got a Knight Exemplar Seneschal named Decimus, who's sort of his right-hand man. While all the Knights Exemplar and the Flame Guard and everyone that serves under Tristan, they respect him, Decimus kind of looks at him with this side eye the whole time, kind of, I'm not sure, is this guy really as humble as he's acting? Is he just trying to get something? He's acting this way because he wants to move up the ranks. He's playing politics. And it breaks Tristan's heart through. He really does just want what's best for the people. So through all this, Tristan fights alongside warcasters like Severius, Fiora, Malachus, different units like Temple Flame Guard, the Cleansers, the Knights Exemplar, and all of them gain so much respect for him throughout all of it. Even though his heart isn't in combat, he proves himself time and time again on the battlefield. When it's all said and done, he's even promoted to sovereign by the Viscos, and this causes Decimus to doubt him even more. He's like, this is what you were after. And there's times where it breaks him down. He's crying behind his mask of office, and he's actually thankful that the priests of Protectorate have to wear the mask because no one can see his emotions. A lot of the higher ups try to pull him aside. They try to get him on their side as they're all playing different, political sides against each other in the synod. Everybody's kind of fighting for power.
So I can understand why Decimus is so skeptical of him. Have you seen or read the Signar novel yet?
I haven't. Godless is the only novel I've read so far.
Okay, so I haven't read Godless, but I've read the Signar ones, and in there it casts a different light on the Protectorate and how they are. So I can definitely understand why Decimus would be skeptical, because based on the Signar novel, that is not how they typically act. So all for Tristan being a humble man of the people, it's definitely not the Protectorate's motive most of the time.
And that's a good, I'm glad you said that. It's a good point you make, because Tristan is what I think is one of the few actual legitimate good people. There are some in the Warmachine universe, but for the most part, all of them kind of have a little something that's not exactly, they're not the good guys you think they are. And Tristan, I think, is one of the few who actually is, the only way I can think to say it, he's pure of heart.
Yeah, and if you read that Signar novel, there is a Menite who joins the Signar Stormblades, and it's an interesting juxtaposition of him trying to get away from what they teach, in the Protectorate versus what he believes, and trying to be a good person, but yet all his countrymen, look upon him with scorn, and all the Signarans look at him like he's what's the good word for it? Like he's just the enemy and not to be trusted, and he's in the middle, not sure how to react. He just wants to be a good person and live his life. And it's interesting seeing those types of characters in the universe where you don't see them very often.
Well, I've only read one novel. I've read 2.5 so far of the anthology books with the expansions, and it was in Wrath that I discovered just how dark the Protectorate actually can be. That really opened my eyes up. I read that first, so reading Godless afterwards and learning about Tristan really kind of made me go, okay, he is actually one of the good guys. He was just a Laeli's child. He was an immigrant trying to get away from the fighting, and the Protectorate not only saved him, but like Minoth gave him a purpose, gave him a reason for living. And his whole life then is based around that purpose. His whole life, even once he becomes a warcaster and he's got to fight, he's still, like I said, his heart is on the streets with the people, with the poor, feeding people, helping people, preaching. And he works his way up to where he winds up with one of the Scrutators, Viscos Solars. And they have a captured Praetorian that after a fight with the Scorn, and he doesn't have to, but he gets put in a situation where he's witnessing soldiers interrogate this guy. And they don't describe it too much in detail, but they describe enough. It's like in the movie where you don't see the person being stabbed, you see the shadow of the knife, and then you see the splatter afterwards. It's sort of like that. They lead up enough to it that you paint a bad enough picture in your mind with the different hooks and the blades and everything. They've got him just strapped up on this rack. And they're trying to get information about Hexerus to find out when his next attack is going to be. And in that, Solars gives Tristan a chance to turn away. He says, if you don't want to see this. And that's when it really hits Tristan in his heart. And what the novel says is this is a part of his temple, a part of his faith. If he were to serve Menoth, this would be part of what he's serving. He couldn't understand it, not yet. But if he were going to fight on its side, then he must force himself to bear witness. And when you read up what was going through his mind and his emotions before that, it's such a, like I said, it's such a tense moment where he's forcing himself to watch something that kills him inside, because he'll put himself through that if it means he can go out there and help the poor.
Those racks, they're no joke. They were terrible implements of war and torture, and it was kind of appalling, just a little bit they talk about in that Signar novel. I won't ruin why that was in the book, but it was really eye-opening as far as how the Protectorate dealt with what they considered to be traitors or enemies, or just any reason they could. It would go up on the rack, and basically once you were on that rack, you were not coming down until you were dead.
When I was talking about reading Wrath, what really showed me how dark the Protectorate could be was Resnick, who's a former Khadoran, and he's going back to a Khadoran city, and he's demanding certain, I want to say they were like nobles or like just high-ranking members of the society, maybe some wealthy people who he had deemed had sinned against Menoth and needed to pay. And as he's rolling up, he's got several of the Khadorans he'd already captured strung up on racks. And the way they describe it, it's just brutal. So with all that said, there's so much political upheaval going on in Protectorate at the time of the Godless novel. And Tristan's not at all a politician, but he finds a way to navigate these waters that are just so foreign to him. And he makes it work. He does so much that isn't of his nature, just to be able to get back to the streets, just to be able to get back to ministering to the soldiers after combat that need to be lifted up. It really hit me and made me want to actually go out and buy the model, which I did. I've got it primed. It's one I'm going to be painting up soon. There's something about the lore that the three of us had talked about previously, where you read something and it makes you go, I want to play that character. And from what I've read on the forums and stuff, Tristan may not be the optimal caster for Protectorate in certain situations, or maybe in any situation, but it doesn't matter to me. To me, just the idea of, I think you and I talked about how we'll sort of role play on the table at times, where Donna will do that with Circle, with Kaya, where sometimes it wins the game, sometimes it loses the game, but she'll have Kaya charge in to try to kill my heavy in round 3, because that's who Kaya is. She really is. She embraces the wilding and she's just reckless. And with Tristan, I really want to do that. I haven't looked too deep into his spell list, but what I've glanced at, I'm pretty sure a lot of it is, supporting role, and that fits thematically for who he is. And I really want to get him to the table and see what I can do with him.
Yeah, it's a great point on the RPG thing. When Dustin and I play, I always tease him if I'm not winning yet. I tease him that he needs to back me into a corner already, because my playstyle tends to not unfold until I get backed into a corner, and then I come up with some weird assassination attempt. But that being said, I tend to play those casters that in the lore tend to be a little bit more wild or aggressive. I play the Chromax, I play the Kayas, even a couple of the Scorn casters I play. They're up there and in your face, and that's just kind of what I get into, because I don't like sitting around playing the attrition and waiting, so I play the casters that fit my play style. I enjoy their lore as well as the mechanics that they bring to the table and how I can implement that towards the way the character works in the story.
What about you, Dustin? What's your favorite character, story, or event from the lore?
So I'm reading through one of my favorite characters' stories, which is Scar, and she's been one of my favorite characters to play. But getting into her lore, finding out that she actually had a huge hand in shaping the lore from more recent events, especially between Haley and Denegra. with how she was there and she was responsible for separating them and taking Denegra, and just everything that came out from after that is just really cool, seeing how what could have been kind of small event, which of course it affects so many things down, over years of writing the story, especially with these characters that it wasn't these minor characters that one is trapped in time and the other one is just this all powerful caster, Haley and Denegra, respectively.
And the interesting thing about that is when Scar kidnapped Negra, it wasn't known that she was a twin, and that caused division between her and Asphyxius.
Yeah, which they didn't, lose that in their writing of the lore. They kept that going over the years of writing the story. And even I'm pretty sure I read in the Henchhold Scrolls that it even carries over, like there's still that rivalry or the bitterness between the two of them.
All right, so obviously we've got Mark IV coming up soon. There's a lot of different beliefs and thoughts and emotions going into this new edition. I was not there in the transition between 2 and 3. I had already stepped away from the game for a bit, but coming back in the game, I saw how much of a vast difference it was, and I can only imagine how difficult it was to make that transition. So now we're seeing that live going from 3 to 4. But the thing is we need to always remember this is not 3 adding in new effects to 4. This is starting in a vacuum. This is all brand new rules. Yes, it's the same models we're used to seeing. It's a whole lot of new stuff going on. It's all been tested in a different environment. We're adding new terrain. We're adding new abilities, new stats. We're eliminating some of the threats. We're adding in different synergies. And so we want to talk about what we think will be great parts to Mark IV and what we're excited the most to try out. So, Jason, what is it that you're most excited about going into Mark IV?
For me, there's two things about Mark IV that I'd say I'm most excited about. I'm excited about a lot, but the two things that really stand out, one is the flat penalty, -2 inches for rough terrain. We got to see that when we played Warcaster. And while Warcaster and Warmachine are totally different games in a lot of ways, that's something we loved. And to be honest, we sort of started house ruling our Mark III games before we knew Mark IV was even on the table. We would just do a flat -2 inch penalty because it makes things smoother, cleaner, simpler. If you move up and now you've got, I don't know, you're entering the forest and you've got 3 3/4 inches left of your movement. And now you've got to figure out, was that 1 7/8 or something? If you stay in the forest all the time, it was a pain. And we just really like how clean, -2 inches, good, got it, and go.
Yeah, it's definitely sped up our games. While we are just filthy casuals, we don't do a time clock. I can only imagine that going into tournaments and whatnot, this is going to make the game so much more enjoyable and not bickering and arguing about, a fraction of an inch versus just, okay, take 2 off and it's quick and easy.
For us, Don and I, we play very casually. We're not playing on a clock, but we play on a Saturday night, and we don't want to be at the table all night. We love the game, but we take our time. We may get up and eat a snack midway through and come back to the table. So 2 hours is about what we want. So anything that cuts that down while not taking away from the gameplay is a definite plus for us.
Yeah, definitely. We have limited schedules ourselves due to family and other events. So yeah, it definitely makes it easier to get more games in a quicker time span, and they're more enjoyable. You're not nitpicking over the tiniest little detail.
Definitely, that's one thing where I think you can easily get lost in little details, and to me, you lose the fun of the game. It becomes more of a spreadsheet. So something that makes it smoother and straightforward like that, that's something we definitely like. The other thing would be the list building. I think with in the past, we were all just used to it. So we didn't think it was a problem. Or I should say we didn't talk about it being a problem so much. And that's the fact that you have battle group points and then you have army points. And you can use army points to pay for things in your battle group, but you can't use battle group points to pay for things in your army. And Donna hated that. We're we don't always play the most optimal list, something you mentioned last time. We play what we want to play, what sounds fun, what struck us from the lore, what models look cool. And there were plenty of times where Donna had, I want this warlock and these 2 beasts or these 3 beasts, and she's got 3, maybe 4 points in her battle group left that are just sitting there. And then she fills up all her army points with what she wants, and those 3 or 4 points they're just left. Nowadays, obviously, we have the command cards that you can fill up any unused points up to 5, and that's great. But back then, it was an issue because maybe there's a solo she wants that's worth 2 points, 1 point, 3 point, 4 points, whatever that she could do that with, but she can't because those points were restricted to the battle group.
And see, this is where it doesn't really affect me too much because, again, I'm a filthy casual and I used to go beast heavy in almost every list and go way above my beast points. So I never had so much of a problem. But for me, the requisition points, losing those is a big, big win.
Yeah, that was always odd for us because when we started playing in theme, Donna would still want to, she was playing Protectorate. That was her first army. She really liked her Exemplar Bastions and she liked her Deliverer Sunburst crew. There's no theme the two of those work in. And she made them work really well together in that she had the heavy hitters with defensive strike with the Bastions. They had Sanguine Bond so they could stay in the fight a little longer. They could spread it out. She had the Sunburst, which was just lighting my infantry on fire from across the field with a 16-inch threat range. It was great in that regard, the way she was able to use the combined arms and make it work out. I would have that extra 5 points that would give me a really nice solo that she was missing out on.
Yeah, and they definitely had a imbalanced selection and from theme to theme. It wasn't as fair to some themes. I've played several factions in the last year, and I noticed some themes I was like, oh, I know it's A, B, and C, and I'm taking those every time. And then I get to the next faction going, well, all right, I'll take this 2 pointer and this 3 pointer, and I guess another 2 pointer just because I got to take them.
In saying that, one of the things I've noticed about the new armies that I really like, just looking at Scorn, for instance, they have both some really legitimate melee and ranged options in that first army. That's something good to see because with certain of the themes in Mark III, it seemed like they tended to shift a little heavier to the melee side or to the range side for certain themes. In this case, I haven't gone through all the armies, but the ones that I play and the ones I've looked at, you've got some good options.
Yeah, and I noticed even with the circle beasts, I think one of the griffins got a ranged attack now, a spray, which was really surprising.
Yeah, that was the Rotterhorn Griffin, which before that was its Animus.
Yeah, and that kind of leads into my favorite thing I'm excited for, which is seeing some of those old models that we never really got to play as much, getting a little bit of new life to them and a new role, so to speak. This will help get rid of that stigma of having the old standards. You don't want to take this one because it's what you always take. Now we have the ability to dive into it and find new roles and new synergies. For instance, I play minions as one of my factions. I love the Black Hide Wrestler. Well, now his animus is worded differently, and now it will work on the Ironback Spitter, which before was really niche in where it would be used. And now I'm excited to see where we can use it because now the animus from the Wrestler will affect the Spitter, and it's opening new doors, and I can't wait to try that out. Hopefully, the Skinwalkers will get some love. They've been hurting for a while. I know there's a lot of people really want to put them on the table with some effectiveness. Maybe they'll get a little bit of a boost in Mark IV.
Skinwalkers have been the primary infantry that we've played in Mark III and then our, I guess you could say, bastardized Mark IV games that we've been using our Mark III cards with until the app came out. And we've had a lot of fun with them, but I get what you're saying.
Yeah, I'm not saying that they're worthless by any means. They just have a specific role that they need to play with what they do, and you need to go into the game knowing what they can do and having the right expectations. But it would also be great if they had just a little bit extra love to them where they didn't have such a limitation on what niche they filled.
Well, I should also say, to be fair, when we run them, it's usually with the Alpha as the command attachment. So he gives them gang. He gives them some nice boost there. And then also with the Warwolf. And if you space everything out right and you place everything where it needs to be, open up some lanes, the Warwolf gets a free charge into an enemy anytime a Wolfspawn model that's friendly gets a melee attack.
Yeah, they've definitely got some great tricks to them. It's just a matter of when they go up against certain enemy models or compared to other circle models, sometimes they get dropped for what would be considered more optimal picks. Still love the models, still find a use for them. It's just hopefully this will give you that ability to not feel like you're taking a much more handicapped pick versus being able to play what you want to play and not having any drawback to it.
Well, there I've got to admit, Don and I definitely play handicap picks because we we have never played. I'll post, hey, I'm thinking about putting this together, but I'm not sure if I want to do that, and I'll get a bunch of comments which are appreciated. Use this version. This is better than that one. Like for instance, I recently made a post about the Blind Walker versus the Black-Eyed Wrestler, and part of me really wants to play the Blind Walker for two reasons. I don't see him being played very much, and I want the challenge of trying to paint all those candles. And everybody says the Black-Eyed Wrestler has more options to him. You can run him in more lists. And I'm like, I can run the Blind Walker in any list. It's just not maybe the best list.
Yeah, as far as in like Mark III, you're talking, I think it's a 5 point difference between the Wrestler and the Blind Walker. So that's a whole nother light beast that you can slip in there.
That's true. But again, I've never said that I make the smartest choices when it comes to building lists.
Well, that's kind of the whole point of this whole podcast, isn't it?
For sure.
So how about you, Dustin? Going into Mark IV, what are you most looking forward to?
The biggest thing that has me excited about Mark IV is the level of dynamic maps that I'm going to be able to come up with. And with the 3D printing that I've been doing for maps, one thing that has stood out the most is there was a bridge that I printed, and it was the size of an actual rectangular zone for warjacks and warcasters, with bridges being such a crucial element in battlefields, with them controlling, crossing points over a river. It really created a really cool narrative to it. But with the addition or the re-inclusion of elevation rules, it gave it even more importance. In the one game that I remember playing distinctly, I parked Sloan up there, and she was holding the bridge against Jem's Scorn, and it felt like she was actually defending a point.
So I remember that bridge game really well. You were playing Kara right up against the edge, and I had Morgul too, but he was too far back. And I had Malik Karn. He was the only thing that could get up there. And the numbers I had to hit just to hit Kara because she was standing up on a bridge behind the rail, just almost out of reach from the swords. I couldn't do anything except send Malik Karn up there and hope and pray he hit every time.
And by him saying hard to hit, she had 22 defense against ranged weapons while sitting on that bridge behind cover.
So that Tinker Turf terrain, I purchased it a few months ago for Warcaster, and it was great. We had a blast. Found out about these new Mark IV terrain rules coming up. Thought, well, let's give it a try. I left him at Dustin's house. He set up the board the next time we came to play, and thought, okay, well, it's got a simple path here and a simple path there. No big deal. It's not going to change anything. And then the next thing you know, I realize I have a unit going one way and another way up the stairs under the pathway. I got blocked here. I can't get through this area. But it really makes the game so much different. It's like comparing chess to 3D chess, where you have to think on different planes now, as well as strategies and line of sights and movement and everything else. It was really, really fun, but it's also really, really challenging when the map is made in certain ways, like that time that Dustin put the different levels and then put a flag up on top of the walkway. And the walkway was so narrow. I believe medium base and small base are the only things that could fit up there. So my poor Death Archon couldn't even help me out on that one.
So with that, it's coming about time to end the podcast. Any closing thoughts, Dustin?
As things are revealed day by day with Mark IV, all I can really encourage is be creative with your list building, be creative with your table design, be creative with how you play and interact with these rules. May it be in a casual format or a competitive format. It's a game. Have fun with it.
We appreciate all you guys taking the time to listen to us ramble on about our love for this game. We know there's plenty of you out there that share our passion for the lore and the casual side of the game, and it's great to hear back from you all that side of the community is present and it's great to have that voice now and to be a part of that voice. So thank you again.
Well said, guys. I agree with everything you guys are talking about. Have fun with the game. Be creative. We've got a whole new toy box here with Mark IV to play with, to explore the scenario examples they're putting out, things that we can really just dive in head first and have fun with. I'm really excited for what's to come. And lastly, as we've said before, thank you everyone who's listening, who's taking the time to share with us these little discussions. We're just pontificating on about a game that we love and the lore and the history and everything from painting, building terrain. We're going to be exploring all those topics as it goes on. So thank you again. We'll see you in 2 weeks.